Hello everybody, it's me, Fee Timms, or the White Zulu, not the White Zulu, White Zulu. And I want to give you another chapter of my second book, Zulu Mists, and we are chapter 17, Back to New Forest, which is the name of our farm in South Africa. As the car pulled into the garage, I saw a group of our Zulu staff standing in a huddle just outside the garage. After I'd stepped out of the back seat of the car with Alastair, they all began to weep, men and women alike. And then the women started wailing and keening, just as I'd done in the police car. The women, my old nannies, and the washing and ironing women threw their pennies over their heads as well. I was speechless. So far, I had managed to hold it together after being told that Fred was dead. But this open display of grief was almost too much to bear. Dad quickly put a stop to it, snapping at them in Zulu to stop that noise and get the bags out of the boot. They looked shocked at his reaction and then devastated, as this had been a completely natural reaction to a death in the family. But then Dad would have been just as horrified at the way I'd behaved in the police car and snapped at me to pull myself together. I felt so sorry for my old friends and had to resist the urge to rush into their warm arms, to be embraced and comforted. I also felt so guilty at the crestfallen looks on their faces as, chastened now, they scurried to collect the luggage. I tried not to catch anybody's eye and stumbled forward along the path which led to the back veranda. All this time, Mum had Alastair on her hip, and later on she said she was watching him carefully to see how he would react to the first black faces he'd ever seen. He took to the Zulus like a duck to water, and there were plenty of eager arms reaching out for him as Mum came through to find me lying ashen-faced on my old bed in what used to be my bedroom at the end of the passage. I'm going to give you a gin and tonic, and then you can have a lie down before lunch. As you can see, there are plenty of takers to look after Alastair. An interminable afternoon, while Mum and Dad had their obligatory rest after lunch, and the house servants had their time off. I took Alastair by his little hand, and we walked slowly at his pace around the garden, down to the grass tennis court, and even as far as the cattle grid, where he could squat and play with the fine sand there. That night, after Alastair had been bedded down in a cot Mum kept in the nursery for when her grandsons came to stay, we put him in the room next to mine, which used to be Dine's. 1 second. Hello? Come in. Come in. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks so much.
I need a signature as well,
Okay. You can find your way in.
Right, let me just take a photo. Tips. There you go, lovely. Just a scribble.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks so much.
You have a good day.
You too. Good Christmas.
And you, sweetie.
Lovely.
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry, folks. I do apologize for that. There was the postman delivering me a small parcel. I should have stopped it, but I didn't quite know how. Anyway, we are at the farm, and I had been walking Alastair around the garden. That night, after Alastair had been bedded down in a cot Mum kept in the nursery for when her grandsons came to stay, we put him in the room next door to mine, which used to be Dine's. I took a sleeping pill and lay there. I couldn't sleep. And when I did doze off briefly, the nightmares were so terrifying that I was afraid to go back to sleep. Eventually, I crept outside and walked up to the huts at the back where the now mainly female house servants slept, and knocked quietly on Lokatia's door. What is it, Nkosazana? Ngiyasaba, I'm afraid. Angikwazi kulala, I said softly. I'm frightened, I can't sleep. Ima, ngizofika. Wait, I'm coming. And she bundled together her blankets and walked back with me to the house. She settled down on the floor in the corner of my room, and I climbed back into bed. And we talked and talked about Fred. What a wonderful person he'd been, how much they had loved him, and how terrible it was that he was dead. There were none of the English platitudes of look on the bright side type of thing. I was allowed to wallow in my grief with Lokatia and cry, and we talked and cried in this fashion until the skies started to turn pale. Ngizophinda ekhaya manje. Kodwa, I must go back home now. Nkosazana, the chief's wife, that's my mother, would not like it if she found me here. And she gathered up her blankets. Lefina said, Musuhlupa manje, don't worry now. Ngizophinda ukhala umntambana. I'll come back here in the evening and sleep through the night. And she slipped out of the back door and back to her hut before Mum, being the early riser she was, could come down to check on the baby and discover her there. Dear, faithful, loyal Lokatia was putting her job on the line in order to keep me company at night. This became the pattern for the next few weeks. My parents went about their business as usual. Dad playing golf 3 times a week. Mum having her tennis parties, garden parties, lunch parties. But I stayed at home. I either walked Alastair around the garden, holding his hand, letting his bare feet toughen up so he didn't have to wear shoes. I also let him run amok on the grass tennis court, having taken a few toys and a ball down there. At the servants' breakfast time, I slipped away with them up to the huts, where we sat and talked about Fred and the wonderful times he'd had up at the farm, fishing, walking, and just thoroughly enjoying the beautiful surroundings. As I had done when I was 13 months old, Alastair learned to sheba. This involves taking a fistful of bread and squashing it into a sausage shape, then dipping it into the sweet, warm, milky coffee and sucking it out again. He and I also enjoyed a bowl full of uputu namasi, which was meal stava porridge, thick porridge, the way the Zulus make it, nice and crumbly, then pouring over it a generous helping of curdled milk, amasi. This was made by pouring fresh, unpasteurized milk straight from the cow into a calabash, stopped up the hole with a cork or even just a wedge of newspaper, and putting the calabash to lie out in the sun for 3 days. Not that different from yogurt. The consistency is more lumpy, and the amasi has a sharp tang to it, which contrasted nicely with a good dollop of brown government sugar to top it off. Alastair loved it as much as I did, and would put away a good helping of it. My sisters came up. Diane had just given birth to Peter, her second son, and brother to Simon, who is not 5. No, don't worry about that. In fact, on the day that Fred died and Mum and Dad got the news, it took a while for Mum to decide whether to come over and fetch me and Alastair or stay with Diane to help her with the new baby. I am eternally grateful that she decided to fetch me and get me away from the oppressive and depressing atmosphere and accusatory atmosphere at Glencruton. My sisters were kind enough, but clearly didn't understand what I was going through. Death is cleaner than divorce, said Diane briskly to me, having had experience of neither. I assumed she was trying to get me to see it in perspective, but advice like that and "you are lucky you still have Alastair" from most people didn't help me at all. I almost preferred it when nobody mentioned Fred at all, ever. Gran came to stay. Once a year, Dad paid for a ticket for her to fly to Port Elizabeth when she was in an old age, where she was in an old age home, up to Durban, where Mum collected her to spend 3 weeks on the farm. To break the monotony of my weeks on the farm, Mum asked me to accompany her to fetch Gran while the nannies looked after Alastair. This I gladly did. But after 3 weeks, it was conversations that skirted around any mention of Fred's death. By now, I had received letters from Nicola, Fred's younger sister, who was expecting a baby of her own. Because it was too painful for Bar, Nicola had undertaken to write and asked me what possessions I wanted sent back to South Africa. This was enormously difficult, as I had to visualize what each room in that house we'd furnished together was in the way of contents. Correspondence became more and more upsetting for both of us, and one morning on the front veranda, I burst into tears as I read yet one more of Nicola's letters, now telling me that she was finding it too difficult to carry on. Seeing this, Mum jumped to her feet and hauled me off the veranda and into the sitting room, where she said, "I can't have you upsetting Gran like this. You'll have to pull yourself together. So I sent a letter back to Nicola, telling her to keep all the furniture and return my possessions, mainly wedding presents for Fred and myself. They could decide what they wanted to do about Fred's things, and if they wanted to keep them for sentimental reasons, then so be it. Beatrice, an old friend of Mum and Dad, and Andy, my best friend's mother. He and I had known each other since babyhood, invited me to go down to Plettenberg Bay and then on to the Cape with them. Andy was going to attend a college there, and B was going to take him. I accepted the invitation with alacrity, as I was longing to see Andy again. He was like a brother to me, and I knew that I would be able to confide in him how utterly bereft I was. Just checking how much is left. Otherwise, I'll have to break it up. Bear with me. I was only too happy to have Alastair, and he was handed over to the housemaids who had replaced Delia and my nannies. Evelina had been pensioned off, and her daughter, Lefina, had replaced her. Locatia was a bit older, and between the two of them, they did all the cooking, as Masangu's, our chef, emphysema, prevented from being able to work any longer, and he'd been pensioned off as well. Mackay, too, had gone back to Mpentla to collect his pension and take a well-earned rest sometime before I even left to go to Scotland, and had been replaced by Hlabazan, a middle-aged houseboy who chopped all the wood, collected and separated the milk, and polished all the floors in the house. Even old Jamela did light garden work, such as cutting the edges of the lawns with a pair of sheep shears. B collected me on the way from Johannesburg. Excuse me if you can hear the jets. Every single day, apart from weekends, we've got air bases all around us, and they practice bombing on the Wash. Oh boy, they're really at it today, just above Chimney Pot level. And the bombing range is a little further from me, and we're on the direct line of the bombing run. So pardon me for that. It's just another distraction. I'll speak up. B collected me on the way from Johannesburg along with Andy, into whose arms I fell, and we had a surreptitiously together out of sight of my parents and his mother. It was lovely to see him again. Can you hear me above this? Yeah, they're going away. They travel in formation, the jets. Sorry, it's distracting for me as well. It was lovely to see him again, and I think he felt the same. He had suffered terribly at Michael House, his boys' boarding school, from all the bullying, and had left school with no idea of what he wanted to do, or rather, he wanted to become a chef and also extend his music career. But his father, ignoring the gifts Andy had been given, put his foot down, saying absolutely not. If we had reversed roles and I wanted to do cordon bleu cookery and carry on with a classical piano career, while Andy had asked to go and be a vet, that would have been no problem whatsoever. Question of gender in those days. Plettenberg Bay was lovely, and B's house right on the beach, absolutely magnificent. The sea was so close that we could hear the southern right whales breathing out of their blowholes at night. I was comfortable but unhappy, missing Fred at every turn. I knew that Andy wasn't happy either. He'd been bullied all his life, not just by his parents, but by the school as well. And he simply had no self-confidence left. He had turned to God for answers and decided to attend a seminary in order to become a priest. Like I was searching for Fred everywhere, he was searching for a modicum of happiness anywhere. We spent hours on the beach, walking and just talking. With Andy, I didn't need to hold anything back, and he felt the same way about me. We loved each other dearly as a brother and sister because Andy was gay. Should, but not a relationship I could have had with any of my sisters. And as we'd done throughout those 6 years at our respective boarding schools, we talked about our inner fears and feelings, trusting one another with our deepest secrets. We arrived in Cape Town to stay at the Mount Nelson Hotel, courtesy of B, the most luxurious place in central Cape Town. After checking in, we went into the sumptuous lounge area where there was a young man tinkling on the grand piano in a corner among some potted ferns. You could always become a piano tinkler at the Mount Nelson, scoffed Andy's mother, and I saw him visibly deflate. Ever since I could remember, he loved playing his baby grand piano at their home in Johannesburg, serenading me with the show tunes he'd played so beautifully. When it was time to drop him off at his new college, Andy and I clung to each other like two shipwrecked people about to go down for the last time. I felt utterly bereft, and again we wept quietly together, out of sight of his mother. I was never to see Andy again. He killed himself. Just after that, he put a hose pipe. In fact, when I announced I was getting married again, a year later, he put a hose pipe through his exhaust and into his car and gassed himself. And that was another terrible, terrible bereavement for me. That's enough for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to John for being my greatest help and support, and also to Sean van Vuren for helping me upload the videos to the YouTube channels. And you will find them. I do, here I go again. I do advertise them every time we have a live stream, and they're always there. If you look for White Zulu on YouTube, you'll find them. And it's best to watch from the beginning if you're going to watch them at all. And goodbye, and thank you for listening.